Alright guys, I am back yet again with another deck profile for Cardfight Vanguard Dear Days on Nintendo Switch. This time we got version 1 of my Dragon Empire overdress plus cross overdress variant of Nirvana Jheva. So version 1 is everything through the second additional card pass, so through D-Booster Set 10. And this deck is a different variant of the Nirvana Jheva deck that not only uses the cross overdress units that Jheva would normally be using, but also uses some of the old original overdress units that was used with the original forms of Nirvana, as well as taking advantage of some dedicated support that this variant of the deck received in D-Booster Set 9. So it is a bit of a different take on the Nirvana Jheva build. Now, I will say that this deck is more kind of just on the just for fun side, since it probably is weaker than just the standard crossover dress deck, because even though this deck has a absolute ton of draw power, as well as technically having a higher ceiling, at least as far as number of attacks per turn that you can pull off, this deck is extremely piece reliant, even more so than just the standard crossover dress build, which was already piece reliant enough. But this one takes it even further, since you had to have a lot of combo pieces set up on your board in order to pull off your big plays, and you have much higher potential for bricking in this deck if you can't get all those pieces into place. Which, it's actually so bad with this deck that it got to the point where deck space became a really huge problem, to the point where I actually ended up having to run some key combo pieces at lower quantities than I would like to. So overall, it is more on the just for fun side. However, if you can pull off your big plays with it, it can be a pretty neat deck to mess around with. So as always, we'll be going through the deck, and then we'll show it off in one card fight. So starting first with the ride deck, it is of course the standard Nirvana Jheva ride deck, so we have our grade 0 starter as Surprise Egg. So when it's rode upon, if you win second, draw a card. Same old starter skill as always. Next for the grade 1, we have Heart Pounding Blaze Maiden Reno. So her auto ability says when this unit is rode upon by Snuggling Blaze Maiden Ryu, you search your deck for up to one Trick Star, call it the Rearguard Circle, and shuffle your deck. And then she's got her continuous skill where she gains 5k if there's a Prayer Dragon in the same column. So second skill isn't used ever because she doesn't really end up on Rearguard. And the first skill lets you search out one copy of Trick Star from your deck, which is very important since we always need at least 2 copies of Trick Star to set up at least one overdress and one crossover dress. So can help you find one key combo piece. Next for the grade 2, we have Snuggling Blaze Maiden Ryu. So her auto ability is when this unit is rode upon by Chakrabarthi Phoenix Dragon Nirvana Jheva, you look at the top 7 cards of your deck, choose up to one Prayer Dragon from among them, reveal it, put it in your hand, and shuffle your deck. So again, helps you dig for another combo piece, potentially getting a Prayer Dragon into your hand to use for your crossover dress, which, of course, this could whiff since you're just checking the top 7, but potential free card advantage, always a good thing. And again, she has her continuous skill where she gains 5k if you have a Prayer Dragon in the same column. That, again, never gets used since she doesn't end up on Rearguard. So then lastly for the grade 3, we have Chakrabarthi Phoenix Dragon Nirvana Jheva. So our activate skill says once per turn, you can discard a card from hand to choose up to one Trick Star and up to one Prayer Dragon unit from your drop, and call them to Rearguard Circle. So this ability is to set up your crossover dress, since it gets you the 2 pieces you need in order to make that. It gets you a Trick Star and a Prayer Dragon. So that is a free +1 to your board, and a very vital way to continuously loop those Trick Stars and the Prayer Dragons back out of your drop, which can be very much needed, especially against control decks. So then she's also got her auto ability that says when this unit attacks, you can counterblast 1 to choose one of your rearguards in the crossover dress state and stand it. So again, very nice ability, giving you a 4th attack per turn, which this deck can actually do up to 5 attacks per turn if you use the normal order, which we'll be going over here in a second. That allows you to restand your overdress unit as well. So like I mentioned before, it does have a higher ceiling than just standard cross overdress, giving you those 5 attacks instead of just the standard 4. But even without the proper setup, if you can't get your combo pieces together or whatever, just getting your 1 cross overdress unit into play and then using this skill can still give you your standard 4 attacks. So you'll still be able to do at least something, even if you can't have your full setup ready to go. So that is the ride deck. Moving on to the main deck. First off, for the grade 3s, we of course have our 3 additional copies of Nirvana Jheva, double frame rare, for our Persona ride purposes. Next, we have 1 copy of our first overdress unit, Vairina Valiente. So you can overdress him onto a Trickstar or a grade 3 or less unit in the overdress state, which most of the time I do try to overdress this onto Vairina arcs, since that will set up for his continuous ability. That says this unit gets power plus 5,000 for each of this unit's original dress. So if you go into him over top of arcs, then that will give you 2 original dress onto him, so I'll give him an extra 10k, bringing him to a 23k base on his own, which can turn him into a pretty good beat stick, and also add some more pressure to his second auto ability. That says once per turn, when the attack of this unit in the overdress state hits, you can counterblast 1 and discard a card from your hand, and stand this unit. So, a nice pressure ability, forcing your opponent to usually have to guard this more often than not if they don't want to have to deal with that restand, which again, we can also restand this with the order, which we'll be going over next. So he can potentially attack up to 3 times in 1 turn, if you played your order that turn and one of his 2 attacks hits. So he is usually the main overdress unit I want out on my board when I'm going for my big push turns, which we are only just running the 1 copy of him, but we do have a way to search him out, so as long as you don't damage check him, you should be able to get him into your hand when you need him most of the time. Now, alternatively, if you wanted to replace him with Vairina Expecta, you could go that route to have another big boss unit in your front row that can still be a big threat. However, I chose Valiente over Expecta, since Expecta has to overdress on top of someone already in the overdress state. So this one is a little bit more versatile, since you can just go on to Trickstar or an overdress unit. And also I'm using Expecta in my other overdress deck, and I just kind of wanted to mix it up. Since I'm doing so many variants of this deck, I just kind of wanted to use something I wasn't using as much. So if you prefer Expecta, you can replace this with that card. So then lastly for the grade 3s, we have 3 copies of our normal order, Clad in Prayer. So you can play this if you have a Vanguard with Nirvana and its card name, and 1 or more units each in the overdress state and the cross overdress state. So there's no cost to play it, but you do have to have a specific setup in order to use it. But when you do play it, you can choose one of your units in the overdress state, and it gets a new auto ability until end of turn. That says once per turn, when your Vanguard attacks, you stand this unit. And then you can also choose one of your units in the cross overdress state, and it gets power plus 10,000 until end of turn. So this is the key card for the deck, letting you both power up your cross overdress unit, as well as giving your overdress unit the ability to restand. So when you combine that with Nirvana Jheva skill, being able to restand your cross overdress unit, you will be able to get your 5 attacks in per turn. So this is the big play of the deck. In order to use it, you of course have to have your cross overdress unit and your overdress unit in play. So that does require quite a bit of setup, since you have to have 2 copies of Trickstar and at least 1 Prayer Dragon in order to get the materials you need to even go into those 2 forms. Plus you need, a copy of each of the overdress and cross overdress Vairinas to go into. Plus also needing a copy of this card in your hand to play as well, obviously. So it does require quite a bit of pieces in order to pull this off. Now, like I said, this deck does have a ton of draw power, so you can go through the deck pretty fast. But even with all that, you know, there still is that RNG factor of getting everything that you need. But if you can get that set up all ready to go and you can play this card, you get your 5th attack out of it. You get to power up your cross overdress units, which can usually already power up itself. So your cross overdress column should be swinging for pretty big numbers twice that turn. And then your overdress column can be swinging twice that turn at least. And of course, like I just said, if you had Valiente, potentially 3 times if one of those first 2 attacks hits. So definitely the key card for this deck in terms of offense. I actually would like to bump this up to 4 if I could, but, you know, like I said, there is significant space problems in this deck. It would be really nice if we had the 4 extra slots, you know, from the rule change in Deer Days. But we don't. We'll have to wait for Deer Days 2 for that. So, yeah, we're just running this at 3 for right now. So that is all the grade 3s. Moving on to the grade 2s. First off, we have 1 copy of our first Prayer Dragon, Sword Equipped Dragon Gallandite. So he has an auto ability that says when this card becomes an original dress, you choose one of this card's outer dress units, and until end of turn, it gets power plus 5,000. And if the outer dress is jeweled sword equipped Garo Vairina, it gets an additional power plus 5,000. So a pretty simple Prayer Dragon for this deck. It just powers up the cross overdress unit that you go into using him. Now we are running 1 copy of Garo Vairina in this deck as well, so he's primarily there for going into him, since he can give 10,000 power to Garo Vairina for that 1 turn. So not a mandatory card by any means. If you wanted to replace this with a 4th copy of some of the stuff that we're, you know, running at 3 copies, then you could go that route. I did just want to squeeze this in because, you know, since I upgraded my crossover dress deck, I had to take out Garo Vairina. So I wanted to use it in some deck, so I squeezed him in at 1 copy into this deck in order to take advantage of him. So next up, we have 4 copies of another overdress unit, Vairina Arcs. So you can overdress him onto Trickstar, and he's got his auto ability that says when this unit is placed on rearguard circle, if it was overdressed, then you can counterblast 1 to draw 2 cards, and this unit gets power plus 5,000 until end of turn. So this is usually your initial overdress unit that you go into. It is also a great draw engine for the deck, letting you draw 2. So that can help you maybe find some of your other combo pieces you need to set up your crossover dress column. Ideally, I try to open with this card, actually, since you can go ahead and go into this on turn 2. And that can give you that extra early draw advantage, as well as a pretty decent rearguard attack on turn 2. And then on turn 3, if he survived and he's still on my board, then I usually overdress Vairina Valiente on top of him, since at that point he would just be vanilla, and Valiente can of course take advantage of the extra original dress. So yeah, he is the primary overdress that we usually go into, but it's mostly just to set up going into some better cards for later. So next we also have 4 copies of our first crossover dress unit, Mirror Reflection Equip Mirrors Vairina. So you crossover dress him with 1 Trickstar and 1 Prayer Dragon, of course. And he has 2 auto abilities. First one says when this unit is placed on rearguard circle by crossover dress, you choose up to 2 cards with Vairina and their card names from your drop, and put them as this unit's original dress. And then his second auto ability says when this unit in the crossover dress state attacks, this unit gets power plus 10,000 until end of that battle. And then you can put an original dress of this unit with Vairina and its card name into the drop, and perform either draw a card or countercharge 1. So this is the main crossover dress unit for the deck. It is a very powerful skill, letting you attach 2 Vairinas to it as original dress from your drop, and then you can use those original dress to either draw or countercharge whenever he attacks, which again he should be attacking twice every turn thanks to Nirvana Jheva. So that can give you quite a bit of card advantage or resource recursion, depending on which one you need more at the moment. Now, after you use up those 2 Vairinas, you do have to reset him in order to be able to use his skill anymore. So you will have to intercept him away or something, and then cross overdress into another copy from your hand in order to keep using him. So he does require a little maintenance to take full advantage of. However, even if you do run out of Vairinas attached to him and you can't reset him or go into another copy, he will still gain the power up even without any Vairinas attached, as long as he's in the cross overdress state. So he can still be at least a 20k beat stick, 30k if you use Clad in Prayer that turn. So even without his ability letting you draw or countercharge, he can still be a nice beat stick unit on your board. So he is definitely the primary cross overdress that you want to go into at all times. So then lastly for the grade 2s, I just have 1 copy of Jeweled Sword equipped Garo Vairina. So this is our other cross overdress unit for the deck, and again it cross overdresses onto 1 Trickstar and 1 Prayer Dragon. And it has a continuous ability that says if this unit is in the cross overdress state, this unit gets power plus 10,000. And for the battle, this unit attacked when your opponent would call cards from hand to Guardian Circle. They must call 2 or more at the same time. So a nice power up and a nice guard restrict on this card, and again if you can use Gallandite to cross overdress into him, then he'll get an extra 10k on top of that as well. So ideally if you Persona Road that turn and you played Clad in Prayer and you used Gallandite to go into him, then he would be at a whopping 50k base that can restand and have guard restrict. So again, he makes for an excellent unit on your big push turn. Can definitely be very dangerous and difficult for your opponent to block. So not as vital as Mirror's Vairina, but still a pretty useful card for this deck since he can hit such insane numbers and be annoying to your opponents with that guard restrict ability. So that is all the grade 2s. Moving on to the grade 1s. First off, we have 3 copies of Strike Equipped Dragon Stragalio. So another one of our Prayer Dragon units. And he has 2 auto abilities. First one says when this unit is placed on Rearguard Circle from hand, if you have a Vanguard with Nirvana in its card name, you can discard a card from hand to search your deck for up to 1 card with the overdress ability or up to 1 Trickstar, reveal it, put it into your hand, and shuffle your deck. So another very useful ability in searching out your combo pieces, letting you grab either a Trickstar or an overdress unit from your deck. So that can be helpful in getting your full setup in order to use Clad in Prayer. Now this is not a plus since you have to discard in order to search out the card from your deck, so it is a ±0. However, that discard can be turned to your advantage since if you discard a Trickstar you already had in your hand or another Prayer Dragon, then you can of course just revive that card with Nirvana Jheva skill. Or if you discarded a different Vairina from your hand, then you can use that as setup to potentially attach to Mirror's Vairina with his skill. So that cost can actually be turned to your advantage as well. And he also has his second auto ability that says when this card becomes an original dress, you can counterblast 1 to choose a Trickstar from your drop and call it to Rearguard Circle. So this is the other way in the deck to revive Trickstar other than with Nirvana Jheva skill, which can be very important, especially if you're playing against a control deck and both your cross overdress and your overdress unit ends up getting retired and both your Trickstars end up in your drop. You can use Nirvana Jheva to revive one of those Trickstars and then use it and Stragalio to cross overdress into whoever you want, and then use Stragalio's skill to revive the other Trickstar that will allow you to overdress on top of it into whoever else. So it can be a very vital skill in helping reset your board, especially if it gets picked apart by your opponent. So overall, an excellent Prayer Dragon that was pretty much built for this hybrid overdress cross overdress build. So next, we have 3 copies of Illuminate Equipped Dragon Grailumir. So he has an auto ability that says when this card becomes an original dress, you Soul Blast 1 To look at the top 7 cards of your deck, choose up to 2 cards with Vairina and their card names from among them, reveal them, choose up to 1 of the revealed cards, put it into your hand, discard the rest of the revealed cards, and shuffle your deck. So this is the prayer dragon that is meant to go into Mirror's Vairina, since it can get any Vairina out of the top 7 into your hand and another into your drop, or potentially 2 into your drop if you don't want to add any to your hand. So that can set up some pieces in your drop to attach to Mirror's Vairina for his skill. And of course it is also another helpful, piece getting ability, since it can search out any Vairina. That can be your overDress Vairinas or your overDress Vairinas. So if you're missing one from your hand and you find it in the top 7, you can potentially get it into your hand to finish your setup as well. So again, a very useful ability for this deck. So the only other grade ones we have are our Sentinels. So first off, we have our 3 copies of Sparkle Rejector Dragon, just your standard perfect guard, as well as the 1 copy of the Nationless Blitz Order Elementaria Sanctitude, which you can play without paying the cost if your opponent's Vanguard has triple drive. So that's all the grade 1s. Moving on to the grade 0s. First off, we have, sadly, only 3 copies of Trickstar. So his continuous ability says this unit cannot be chosen by your opponent's card effects. So just a basic protection ability. Obviously, this is an absolutely vital card for this deck, since you need Trickstar to both overdress and cross-overdress into your more powerful units. Ideally, I would be running this at 4. Again, space became a big issue in this deck. So if you want to replace something else in this deck with a 4th copy, it probably would be a good idea, honestly. I actually have considered taking out Surprise Egg and using another Trickstar as my starter, and then just soul blasting it out with Greylou Mirror, and, reviving it from the drop with Jheva or whoever. So if you can find a way to squeeze in another Trickstar, you could feel free to go for that, because, this deck does require a minimum of 2 copies of him in order to function properly. So damage checking even a single one can be very difficult on this deck. So yeah, whatever you want to do with that. So beyond that, we just have our trigger lineup, which is 4 crit, 3 front, 4 draw, 4 heal, and 1 over. I am just sticking with rainbow triggers for this deck for now. So starting first with the crits, we have 4 copies of Blaze Maiden Zone, just your vanilla crit. If you want to replace it with the effect crit, you can, but we don't really have soul issues in this deck. Next, for the fronts, we have 3 copies of Blaze Maiden Parama. So front with a skill, if your opponent's Vanguard's grade 3 or greater, this unit gets shield plus 5,000. So your 20k shield, front trigger. Next, for the draws, we have 4 copies of Flare Veil Dragon. Again, draw with a skill, if your opponent's Vanguard's grade 3 or greater, shield plus 5,000. So your 10k shield, draw trigger. And then for the heals, we have 4 copies of Blaze Maiden Rona. So just your vanilla heal. As always, if you want to run any copies of the effect heals, you can feel free to do so. And then our 1 over trigger is Dragon Deity King of Resurgence, Dragveda. So his additional effect lets you choose one of your Vanguards and stand it. So always a very powerful skill, restanding your Vanguard. Now, one thing to note is that Nirvana Jheva's on attack skill is not once per turn. So if you sack this and restand Nirvana Jheva, you can potentially use her skill a 2nd time to restand your cross overdress unit again. However, the ability granted to your overdress unit to restand by Clad in Prayer is once per turn. So even if you are able to restand Jheva, you can restand your cross overdress unit a 2nd time, but you will not be able to restand your overdress unit again. So do keep that in mind. But anyway, that is the deck. So we will go ahead and have our 1 fight with it. And let's see, we'll fight Sam this time. And we will be going first. Alright, so we will discard... And I'll drop that crit, I guess. Right, Reno. And then just end our turn. So I'll go ahead and let that one through. And we get a draw trigger, which we very much needed. And he needs a trigger for that to hit, so we'll let it through too. And he did not get one. So that does shut down the rest of his offense this turn. Alright, so let's discard that draw. Right, Ryu. And Reno's skill will let us appear call a Trickstar from our deck. So we will put him... we'll put him over here. And then we'll just attack. And it gets a crit trigger that is wasted. So then he gets to add a copy of Kill Shroud from deck to hand. But he plays Dusting instead. And I think I'll let that one through. And his other rear guards can't hit us. So now we will discard. And as much as I hate to, I think I'm going to drop one of those Persona Ride copies. To ride Nirvana Jheva. And Ryu's skill will let us check the top 7. And we find 2 Prayer Dragons, so I'm going to add Grelu Mirror to our hand. So first I'm going to move Trickstar up, and then we can overdress into Vairina Arcs and use his skill to Counter Blast and draw 2. And Arcs gains 5k. So then we'll call Stragalio from our hand and use his skill. And we can discard 1, so we'll drop Grelu Mirror to search out an overdress unit or a Trickstar from our deck. So we're going to search Trickstar and get him into our hand. And we'll use Nirvana Jheva's activate ability to discard him. And then we can call that Trickstar right back along with Grelu Mirror. And that will allow us to cross overdress into Mirror's Vairina. And use Grelu Mirror skill first to Soul Blast. And we check the top 7, and we find 2 copies of Arcs. So I'm actually not going to put either one of those into my hand. I am going to discard them both. And that will let us use Mirror's Vairina skill to attach both of them to him as original dress. So then we'll go ahead and play Clad in Prayer from our hand. which will give Mirror's Vairina an extra 10k, and Arcs the ability to restand. So with that, I think we're good to go. So we will attack with Arcs first, not boosted.
Vanguard にアタック。ノーガード。やるじゃないか。ダメージチェック。
And then we can attack with Mirror's Vairina and use his skill to gain an extra 10k. And we can detach one of these Vairina arcs from him and either draw or countercharge. And we're going to draw this time. And he gets a crit trigger. So then we can attack with Nirvana Jheva. And we'll use Jheva's skill to counterblast. And restand Mirror's Vairina. And then the skill granted to Vairina Arcs will let us restand him as well. And we get a heal trigger, which we don't get, but that power will let this attack hit, so we'll give that to Jheva. So then we can attack with Vairina Arcs, boosted this time. Oh, and he lets that one through too. So we got him to 5 already, so now we'll attack with Mirror's Vairina once again. And his skill will again give him an extra 10k. And we'll detach Arcs to draw. And he perfect guards that one. So we got him to 5 before he even hit grade 3. Must have not much in his hand to guard with. But he does get to search out a copy of Death Winds from his deck. Winchy, please. And he was able to fill up his board, as well as getting a Persona Ride copy into his hand, thanks to Freiheit. And he puts Death Winds into his soul, so he'll be able to power up his front row as well. So let's see, if this attack hits, he'll get to restand his Vanguard. So I believe I am going to go ahead and perfect guard this one. And we'll discard a Grelu Mirror. Oh, and he pulled his over trigger. It's a good thing I perfect guarded that, because that's going to double the power and critical of his whole front row. So that is 2 crits, but I think I'm going to let it through anyway. And we get a front trigger. So let's see, we'll guard that with that heal, and then we'll intercept with Mirror's Vairina. Alright, so now we can Persona Ride. And then I am going to go ahead and overdress into Vairina Valiente on top of Arcs. So he'll gain an extra 10k since he's got 2 original dress. So then we'll use Jheva's Activate ability and discard Gallandite. And that'll let us revive Trickstar and Gallandite right back from the drop. So we'll put them there. And then we can cross overdress into Garo Vairina. And Gallandite skill. We'll give him an extra 10k for the turn. And then once again, we will play our normal order, Clad in Prayer, to give Garo Vairina 10k, and Valiente the ability to restand. So I believe we are good to go. So we will attack with Valiente first, not boosted. And he guards. So then we'll attack with Garo Vairina for a whopping 50,000 with guard restrict. Oh, and he's got to lay it through. And that front does not save him, so we got him already. So there you go. That was my overdress plus cross overdress Nirvana Jheva deck. Like I said, it is more kind of just for, you know, the just for fun side. But it can be a pretty neat deck to play around with, especially when you can get your combos off. So anyway, I will be back soon with more deck profiles. So until then, I guess that's all for this video. So lots of luck to you and yours.